This podcast was recorded on the ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and the Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation.
This is Humans on Rights, a podcast advocating for the education of human rights. Here's your host, Stuart Murray.
Richard Thomas has been a Manitoba tech industry professional for over 20 years. He is a certified leadership coach and currently a senior leader of software engineering at Skip the Dishes, where he has been instrumental in leading innovative projects and driving technological excellence for over 5 years. Rich is the founder and global chair of Jet in Color, which is an employee resource group within Skip's parent company focused on marginalized ethnic communities currently spanning Canada, UK, Germany, and the Netherlands. Richard's leadership and commitment to creating positive change have propelled Skip's technological advancements and strengthened the fabric of its diverse corporate culture. Richard is pivotal in championing diversity and inclusion within the tech industry, fostering an environment that celebrates multiculturalism and supports underrepresented voices. A central figure in the Black community, he is revered for his dedication to mentorship, community engagement, and advocacy for racial equality. Rich, welcome to Humans on Rights.
Thanks for having me, Stuart. Happy to be here.
So let's just kind of get some background. Rich, I know that anybody that had a chance to listen to my Humans on Right podcast with your brother, Chef Rob, it was fantastic. And he gave me a little bit of background. But, tell me from your perspective growing up in Winnipeg, how you became interested in the career that you're on now and the technical side. We're going to explore that. But how you became such a champion for diversity.
Growing up in Winnipeg, it was a great environment growing up. We have, two loving, super supportive parents who had immigrated from the Caribbean here and had really, really instilled the values of hard work, but also had talked to us at an early age about understanding the challenges of, living in a society where you are not the majority. And at a young age, I never really realized what a lot of Black parents have really instilled the values of the speech of you're gonna have to work twice as hard for half as much. And it was something that resonated with me when I was much older. As a child, I didn't get it, but I started seeing different inequalities, and I had a really hard time kind of trying to understand that. My first realization where things were a little bit different was by junior high. I had realized I never had any teachers that looked like me. And looking at anybody who was an authority figure who looked like me, right? Aside from my parents. So it's something that I always really had carried with me. But that kind of left me when I, left school and I was, kind of on my own with friends, and we dealt with certain things and certain challenges socially and started recognizing it. But I always thought they were social issues, and I didn't really realize that social and workplace issues are much in the same. So at one point in my career, I started realizing when I had moved on, I'd done some technical work, and I decided I wanted to go into business for myself. And when I would meet with companies, I was my own consultant. I would always get asked to speak to the owner or who my manager is. And not for any reason that there was something wrong, but they were I was impression that I was going to be speaking with the owner. And I was well, I am the owner, right? This is me. And it's always there was a little bit of a pause in there. And I always convinced myself that it wasn't what it was. And I think that partially was because growing up, you get surrounded by this really strong Black community, but then you also get surrounded by another community that you hear different stories. You hear certain things happen because of race and because of the color of your skin, but then you hear from another group saying that well, that's not the case, right? And we're taught in schools that we are going to be judged and evaluated and celebrated on our merit and our hard work. And understanding that that can be the case, but it's not always the case. So for me, once I became working in a professional environment, I started seeing different things where now full circle, I feel like I'm back in school, right? Because I'm learning all the things and learning this professional environment, and I'm still not seeing anybody who looks like me in authoritative positions, in powerful positions. So to me, that really, really got me thinking, and it really started pushing me as a person to say, well, why not me? Like, why can't I be in those roles? And I've always believed in strong leadership, and I've always been a self-starter. So somewhere along the lines, right, when I started getting deeper into like professional career in like early 2000s, was like, okay, starting to realize that like, hey, I don't have to limit myself to what others believe. I can start, pushing my own direction.
So, Rich, you got involved in sort of the study of technology. You went to Red River to learn some of that background. What got you interested in sort of looking at technology? What kind of spurred your interest about that?
My dad, actually. My dad's a teacher. And what my dad had done at one point was, as a little side business to make a little bit of extra money, he decided that he wanted to take a course in order to like help build and repair computers. And it was, I'd like to say it was an online course, but when I think of it back, there was definitely not an online course, but a self-study course that he had to understand. It was to become A+ certified. And so when he was building computers and fixing computers, I often kind of hovered and asked questions. And so my dad was always into technology. We had a computer growing up. Play games. We didn't have we had an Atari, but after Atari, we didn't have any gaming systems. We had a Commodore 64. And then my dad's interest in technology just really started, driving that within me.
Interesting. Rich, did you kind of look at it and say that you wanted to be a programmer, or did you look at it and say that you wanted to like have a specific area, or were you just saying, look, I'm going to look at this technology and see where it takes me?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So it was something that I always liked doing, but I went to Red River and I took business administration. And right near the end of my business administration, I noticed a course came up, and it was outside of Red River. It was around computer programming. And I'd spent time, I think I'd been in Red River for about a year and a half, right at this point. And this course came up. I don't even know how I saw it. This course came up, and I thought, this is what I want to do. This is exactly what I want to do. I want to be involved in technology, and this is what I'm going to do. So against better judgment, I was probably 6 months away from graduating business admin, but this course was starting right away. So I left it. I left business admin, and I hopped right into this course, and I learned some HTML and I learned COBOL programming. And that really started giving me an interest in technology and understanding a little bit more. I started taking some Microsoft courses. Like, it really just opened my world in terms of like what technology could be and where it was going.
Yeah, interesting. And so when you graduated from there, tell us, what did you do?
The company that had created the course, they also had a consulting company, and they ended up landing a government contract for testing computers we all remember when the year 2000 was going to hit and the clock roll over.
Right, exactly.
It was the apocalypse, right? So we were the guardians of the apocalypse. So we had developed a program that tested on a floppy disk that would run and test to see whether clocks on computers would roll over properly. So we had to test computers all over the province doing this. So we'd be on the road for weeks at a time and testing in rural areas. And shortly after that project started, an opportunity came up to lead the team, and I had volunteered to lead the team. And to me, that was like my real first taste of leadership. From there, I worked with a few different local companies as a full-time employee. One company I started with, it was a company called Comark. They just asked, they would hire me just to change toner cartridges. That's all it was. To me, I was like, I was going to do more. And that. I was just looking for a foot in the door. And from there, a few years later, I'm leading, national projects and working with people from all across the country, and really, really enjoyed that. And I'd moved on to a few different, outgrown that. I was there for about 8 years and outgrown that and moved to different areas. And then I worked with one organization, and sort of this is where I started really seeing some things. I had been hired as a manager, but I also saw that I wasn't really being treated the same as other managers. I was on a very, for lack of a better term, very short leash. And from there, I decided that, you know what, this may be a good opportunity for me to go on my own. I've been thinking about it for a while. I was a single guy, no kids, low mortgage payments. I didn't know a lot of money, different things. So I figured this was the best time for me to go off and do it. And from there, I launched a business called Remix Technology Consulting. With Remix, I worked with primarily small and medium-sized businesses and focused on a little bit of computer repair, which was something that I didn't really want to do, but I focused more on the network side. We're building smaller networks. I did a lot with chiropractic offices and smaller businesses in terms of their startup or troubleshooting some of the issues. And so I did that. I did that for about 6 years on my own.
Wow. So backing up just a bit on that, Rich, as you say, you were working for a national organization, obviously at a senior level, but you felt that you were, to use your terms, you were on a short leash from a professional at a serious level. Would you say that was kind of your first serious encounter with racism?
The organization that I worked with a little bit on the national level, I had actually a really great experience with them. And when I had moved on, it was something that I needed to grow. The one that you're referring to, yeah, it was. I started noticing it not only with myself, but my staff. I was the only person who had a diverse team, which also kind of struck me a little bit odd when I had joined that company. It struck me a little bit odd, and again, it was my trying to understand, was this the reason why I was hired? And I saw the unfair treatment of those people who were under my direct report from a boss above me, and that down through me. And so I really saw that it was not a place where I needed to be. That was my really first experience with in the workplace.
Interesting. And so there you are. You decide you've got some great experience. You're going to hang up your own shingle, start your own business. But then you have this interesting introduction. As people come in, try to employ you, they want to speak to the owner. They want to speak to the boss, of which, of course, that is you. Did you ever anticipate that might be a conversation you'd have to sort of deal with until you really got yourself or your company established as who you are?
No, I didn't. It was not something that I expected. And I think that the first few times that happened, it really caught me off guard. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. Honestly, I think the first time it happened, if I'm trying to remember correctly, I think I laughed, actually. I think I thought it was kind of funny. But then I started realizing, I'm like, hey, this is not funny. Yeah, and it's not funny. And I think that I was actually really discouraged. And I stayed in that business for the sole reason that it was paying the bills. I honestly didn't enjoy it. I actually started from there near the end of it. I actually started a different business, which was I opened a gym, and I was a trainer in that gym, and I ran that gym for 9 years, and up till recently, actually, tell you the truth. And alongside when I was running that business, as I ended up shutting down my consulting business and started doing some full-time work, I was running a gym, and one of the trainers and 2 employees, and I was working full-time in the technology space. So I was a pretty busy guy.
Wow. Yeah, you sure were. That's amazing. it's fascinating because, you can sort of see how when as I read your intro about what you're doing and some of the amazing things that you're involved in, like you didn't do a major pivot. I mean, maybe when you're at Red River, just before you're going to graduate in business, you kind of pivoted, but you kind of found yourself working in the world of technology. And so let's talk about what you're currently involved in now, Rich, which sounds very, very exciting. And again, I always have to put a plug in for Nadia Thompson because she's such a driving force and she's such an incredible person. I mean, she was the one that just absolutely was so adamant that you and I meet and have this conversation. So a shout out to Nadia. But let's talk about what you are doing now and some of the projects you're involved in. I want to touch on the fact that you're global chairman for Jet and Color. But before we get there, let's back up and just kind of position. Did you get hired to work at 24/7 out of the last current job that you had, or how did that come about? Sorry, I apologize. Skip the dishes. Skip the dishes, not 24/7. You got hired by Skip the Dishes. My mistake.
Yeah, no, I'd been at 24/7 before, but yeah. So moving towards Skip was this pivotal moment in my career. Honestly, to bring in that story, I'd worked with an organization for a while, and again through consulting and leaving that and moving into different spaces, and I was in a position where I was back in that toxic environment, and I saw the way that we had people who were, again, there was a few who looked like me, but not many, but they weren't in the same space. But I'd seen senior level leaders, executive leaders, treat people of color a certain way, and other minorities, females a certain way. And it was something that, even though I'd seen it in my career, I'd kept quiet on it forever. And at this point, I got to a point where I was like, I don't think I can keep quiet anymore. I also knew that if I had brought it up and brought it directly to senior leadership and the HR team at the time, that probably was going to be the end for me in that organization. And I brought it up, and it was. So shortly after that, company, I was told they were going in a different direction, and I was exited from the organization. That was the best thing that's ever happened to me. I really started looking at where I wanted to be and what organization I wanted to be with and where I could make a difference. I really started believing that I could make a difference, where before I didn't as much. I think that, going back, owning the business, the gym, being able to help support people and help change people's lives through physical fitness, that really had inspired me to do more. And so this became more of a new mission for me, and wanting to be in a space where I could actually make a difference. So I'd put feelers out and talked to a few different people, and I had some contacts for people who worked at Skip, and I was talking to them about the organization. And the organization had been going through a bunch of changes. The time when I came about was just when Skip was being sold to some owners in the UK. And so when I started, I was told that there's some challenges and some disruptions in the organization, just business wise, that like we're looking for somebody who's really going to come in and understand that there's going to be some challenges and has some big opportunities. So I moved on to Skip, and I really, really enjoyed the people and the culture and that space. Getting to what you're looking to again, like in the ERG space and our Jet and Color, how that happened was, it was during the summer of George Floyd incident. Skip as an organization, like many organizations, wanted to put out a response to that. And Skip had put out a response to that, a public response on it. It fell a little bit short because for the people of color in the organization, as much as we felt supported, we were looking for something more, right? We were looking for something more. So what had happened is, our CEO at the time, he'd reached out to a few key people and wanted to get some feedback. I was one of those people. And then we had actually a really, really good discussion. He was really, really open about his understanding and his lack of understanding, and wanting to learn more. And so we had a really, really open discussion on some of the challenges that people of color face. And so it was actually right then and there, through that conversation, that we decided that we were going to start an internal group, and we were going to see how we could make a difference in our organization. and see if we could bring some more attention to some of the challenges that people of color face in business.
As we're talking about this, just to put a timeline on it, Rich, are you now at Skip? What you're talking about, this is sort of an experience that you're bringing to Skip. So the fact that you are the global chair of Jet in Color, does that work with inside Skip, or are you outside and this is something that you do, but you're bringing that into Skip as sort of I don't want to say consultant, but maybe you are. Maybe that's something that you're doing. I'm trying to differentiate if Jet and Color is a standalone or if it's inside the Skip organization.
So the reason why we're called Jet and Color is because how ownership has come. Our parent company is Just Eat Takeaway. So our acronym within the company is Jet. So that's what in Color is our global ERG. And so that started out actually as just a Skip. We were called the BIPOC Network originally. And that was operating within Skip. Now, our organization in the UK had a group called BAME, and I don't know that term's not used anymore, but it is Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic. And so that was a group that had been formed, but had been disbanded, so to speak, right? There's people had left the company in different pieces. So we started BIPOC Network within Skip as a standalone. And what are the things that we can do? We wanted to bring, we wanted to celebrate, we wanted to educate people, but we also wanted to celebrate, achievements, and we wanted to make sure that we can create a more inclusive environment and help influence, some of the things that we can do in terms of inside our organization.
And so part of this always in my mind, when you look at sort of the issues around diversity, inclusion, and what does that sort of look like, you have to look at a whole organization and see, is it permeating the highest levels of decision-making in the executive suites? And is it starting to become a senior role? And is that something that you have seen, or is that something that you're developing, or is that something you're leading?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of all the above. So within Skip, again, as you mentioned in the intro, like I'm a senior engineering manager, right? So I work with our engineering team. The Jet and Color is something additionally that I do because it's something that I'm passionate about. And there's I have a group of other people who work within that. Our aim is to, as I said, like we don't want to be this group that just celebrates things. Like we celebrate Black History Month. We've actually been celebrating, this is the 4th year that we've celebrated Black History Month in an organization. And we've done different things, like we had a big Diwali celebration last year. We have a lot of panels and discussions. We had a really big one around Canada Day last year, and kind of meeting to different people and different backgrounds. And we celebrate a lot of different things there. We are now, as part of that, we have executive sponsors who work with us. So we have members of the executive team who work directly with us. And we work towards creating more, not only visibility, but opportunities for people of color. So the organization has done a really good job. There's still a lot of work to do, but the organization has done a really, really good job in terms of being able to not only do a good job of how we hire, but making sure that we've created support systems within that. So I've seen a huge difference in how we've hired more diversely since when I started. It's actually completely different. The way that, and the emphasis on diversity in our hiring and our inclusive environments that we're speaking to and creating, and the amount of senior leaders and people who've reached out to me, and again, maybe for some advice or some support, and having people who are at an executive level being able to reach out and say, hey, are you okay if I talk to you about something? I'm curious about this, right? So I've really, really enjoyed being able to be part of that.
Yeah, from my perspective, Rich, is that you've got sort of the technological sort of background on the side and working in technology, which, it's obviously a huge part of an organization like Skip, but that you have been able to work within the organization that sounds like it's embracing what it is that you're trying to do with respect to bringing in a diverse culture into the whole organization. And you're obviously at a very senior level. Do you see that that is happening across the entire organization, that they're elevating? Because sometimes, there has to be mentoring to anybody that goes into a senior role. Is that something that you're seeing a lot of at Skip?
I'm seeing a little bit of it. There's definitely a lot more emphasis on it. I see our senior leadership becoming more open and aware of the challenges. And I'm seeing that we have programs now in our organization for mentorship. I'm part of two of them, but we have programs that are specifically structured in. We have a couple leadership programs, and then we have two mentorship programs, and those are not specifically just focused on people of color, but managers are encouraged to make sure that there's opportunities for people of color and being able to do that. So organizationally, I think there's still a long way to go, like many organizations, in terms of seeing those people who are maybe mentored or those roles moving into some more senior roles. But I'm seeing the ground level work and a lot of the ground level work at the organization being done right now.
And do you feel that they've created a sort of an open enough culture? And again, this conversation isn't about Skip; it's about Rich Thomas. But I just wondered, within that, Rich, just from your perspective, do you feel that there's a real sort of openness to embrace that kind of culture there? Because I know that you can read stories, you can read in the paper, you can talk to people about the intention might be good, and people are trying to do the best they can, and they're trying to move things, and whether it's checking boxes, which becomes a little bit vacuous, frankly, and meaningless. But, there are those elements that organizations, when they're trying to look at sort of the whole issue of diversity and equity and what does that entail, from your perspective, I mean, because you have leadership qualities about you, you see that that's happening and being embraced in the organization you're currently in.
Yeah, I do. I always tell people, this is, I guess, one of my lines, so to speak. I always tell people that progress isn't linear. It doesn't work in that straight line always. I think from what I've seen and from what I've experienced, there's a huge openness in our culture. Mostly the things that I've been speaking to are things around, some of the the events around Black History Month and those pieces. There is a huge culture piece in the organization. Multi-faith rooms, right? For example, right? The organization had, we'd moved into our new office, and we have, I've never been in an organization that has multi-faith rooms and embraces the opportunity to educate people on different backgrounds. We're doing right now Ramadan, right? And there are a lot of communications around Ramadan and what it is and how to support your colleagues who are participating in Ramadan. Like, there's a lot of different things that are happening there. And just like society, there are going to be people who are a little bit more open to discussing things, but there's a lot of leaders who aren't people of color, who are looking for change and who are looking. The challenge always is like, how do you do it, right? How do you do it? And what's my part is always like the biggest challenge, because it does take a lot of effort. And I think that's where, I don't want to say we're getting stuck, but I think that's kind of where it slows down.
From your involvement, what would you say, sort of in the past number of years, would you say has been the biggest change that you specifically have seen within the organization in terms of advancement?
I think that the conversations that have been had with the executive team, I think when I speak specifically the executive team and all senior leadership, those are a lot more open conversations in terms of like, how do we get better, and what are the things that we can do. The organization, us an organization, have done things within, like, there are women in tech programs. Like, we have a lot of ERGs. So it's actually interesting, because when we had started this, we had a women in tech ERG, but we had started our ERG, and the environment for inclusiveness has just grown, because we have different, we have a lot of, and I know a lot of organizations have ERGs, but I know a lot of them don't, actually. Like, I find it interesting. I think some of the bigger ones, the biggest advancement I've seen is the openness to celebrate as well as ask questions. So celebrate. We talked about some of the events, the things that we've thrown. We have it's called the Hub. It's our kind of recreation space. We have cultural events there all the time, and it's a packed house. And we're starting to see senior leaders, take part in those. We have a lot of discussion panels. We do a lot of panels about really, really important issues, and we're seeing our senior leaders take space in there and ask questions, like ask open, honest questions. And so I think there's still always, again, more room to like improve and to go. But I always keep reminding myself the same thing I tell everybody is progress isn't linear. Doesn't mean after this step, then this next step. Sometimes it's a little bit of a stall, sometimes a little bit of a revolution, but I'm seeing that there's a willingness to move forward. The hard part, again, is how do we do this, and what do I, as a person, a non-person of color, how do I help this organization?
Right. And then, Rich, just to come back to an acronym, you talk about ERGs. Is that Employee Resource Group?
That is Employee Resource Group.
And the fact of life is that, as I read in your intro, this organization that you are chair of, Jet in Color, it's focused, as I said, on marginalized communities, talking about Canada, where we are here, the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands. So are you finding that within all of those different countries that things are advancing in different ways, or are they kind of advancing in a way that you see them being very equitable? Or do you say, there's some countries that are really very, very progressive and some aren't quite that way, and so it's a part of what you do on a daily basis?
I always had this belief that the European society is a little bit more advanced, a little bit more open thinking. Not when it comes to this. From a cultural standpoint, we've moved a little bit quicker in our organization than we've had in other areas. But understanding that there are different things. As an example, so one of my co-chairs, the co-chair for Jet in Color, who I helped lead that group with, she's based in Germany. She's originally from Toronto. So she's a Black woman from Toronto who's based in Germany. And historically, we know there's been some challenges identifying and speaking about race and in specifically Germany. But from some of the work that she's done and being able to see that there's a willingness, but it's people are coming around a little bit slower in some of those areas. And again, UK a little bit more, Netherlands a little bit more as well too. That's where our parent company resides, and we have our IB&B director who's out there too, so he's driving some things. So we're seeing those spaces grow. We're just happy to help lead the way from a standpoint here in Canada, understanding that every culture is a little bit different, and maybe the willingness to change perspective in certain ways is sometimes tough for some people and some cultures, but it is moving along more than I would have expected. There again, the fact that we have local chapters in these places is an amazing sign, and so that these are things that never existed before, and we're getting a lot of support from our executives in those areas too.
Yeah, and Rich, I mean, one of the things that you mentioned early on is when you were going to school, whether it was other classmates or teachers, you didn't see anybody that kind of looked like you. And now you're at a senior role at Skip. Are you starting to see more people potentially applying to be a part of the organization because the diversity is there? So when they hold up a mirror, they do see themselves in that organization.
I'm starting to see our organization being very open in terms of wanting to hire diversely and speaking to that publicly, also speaking internally. Doing that, I'm also seeing that the drive for mentorship and leadership is happening a lot, and seeing a lot more people of color to be so. And I think that as we see more people of color and we see more opportunities for people of color, this is what drives people to make change, right? This is what drives people to make change. When I look at our organization and my team, I remember I had a goal, and I wanted my team to be at least 50% female and at least 30% people of color. And that was something that I set and that I did. And I didn't need approval for it. I didn't need permission for it. But seeing the moves, the small moves that I made, because I realized I have a level of power and influence that I can help drive the organization forward. So in me doing that, I started seeing a lot more interest in people moving into like more leadership roles and more senior roles, and that, and seeing it like it happened pretty fast after that, seeing that. So getting a lot of, again, people of color starting to say, hey, I see that there's an opportunity, and I see that somebody's giving an opportunity for me, and I see somebody who looks like me, or somebody who is a person of color who is doing those things, and where I didn't before. So now it opens that door for a possibility, saying, hey, maybe I can be in that space too.
That's very positive and forward looking. And I want to just get on the off ramp of our conversation with kind of maybe a couple of last questions for you, Rich. You put a lot of stock, and I think you're recognized as somebody who is very big in leadership or coaching. Talk a little bit about what that means to you in terms of when people look at you in terms of the role that you are, leadership and a coach. What sort of pressures do you feel in an environment like that, that those are some of the expectations that people are expecting from you?
That's a great question. So there are a lot of pressures. I do think that there are a lot of pressures in that, especially when, again, seeing that there aren't a lot of Black leaders or people of color who are leaders, and people do often look to me for coaching. I've always believed that we have opportunities, and we have opportunities to help people grow, and it's something that I've taken very, very seriously. And so I've been a trainer in the gym. I've coached women's soccer for a long time. I have not in a while, but seeing the difference that like positive leaders can make, and I've had some really great leaders as well too. Seeing that impact, it's something that I take really, really seriously. I have an 18-month-old daughter, and I want to ensure that I can help lead and coach the generation who will be coaching and leading the next generation who will be coaching and leading my daughter. So to me, it's anything to create a wave of impact.
Yeah. If somebody said to you, you're in the leadership, you're in the coaching world, was there somebody that you could say, here's somebody who I aspired or, gave me a sense of what I could do, and I always took a lot from that person, whether it's somebody that we know or whether it's somebody who's maybe a bit more famous? Is there somebody that you would say, when I think about leadership, this is the person that comes to mind?
It's not necessarily one person, but pieces of people. One of my heroes and people who I always, admire for leadership, Nelson Mandela. I read Long Walk to Freedom. I read it every year. To me, it's such an inspiring piece on how leaders can be empathetic, and how leaders can listen, and how leadership is not often viewed. Leadership, I think, typically in our environment, North American environment, is always like viewed as like this thing that somebody is pushing you forward and being the person who's always standing in front of everybody. And it's not. Like, leadership is a whole lot of different things. And he really, embodies a leadership style that resonate with me personally. And there's so many different people. My mom had always been a person who'd showed me support, and somebody who always believed in me. And she's a person who's always, I remember when I first started out on my own in my own business, I remember what my mom said, and it was a very positive way. She just said, well, she's like, now you're really going to see what you're made of. And I still remember that conversation. It wasn't a like, you'll see. It was just like, she knew it. You just needed it. So that's kind of, I guess, the two people that really stand out in my head.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fantastic. And, it's always tremendous to look at somebody who's obviously historically is a magnificent, iconic person like Mandela. And, then somebody who has every day that was part of your life, that is somebody who has been a wonderful mentor and leader. And that's a great way, Rich, I think, for us to sort of end our conversation on how you have managed to become such a innovator, such a kind of a disruptor in an organization to ensure that diversity, equity, a sense of who organizations can be, that people start to feel comfortable. And so rather than worrying about who might be looking at them because potentially the color of their skin or their background, they're being valued because they are participating, because they have tremendous opportunities to participate. And you're obviously leading that way at a very international organization. And so congratulations to you, Rich Thomas, and thank you for sharing a little bit of time with me on Humans on Rights. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
We will be in touch again, I'm sure. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Humans on Rights. A transcript of this episode is available by clicking the link in the show notes of this episode. Humans on Rights is recorded and hosted by Stuart Murray. Social media marketing by Buffy Davey. Music by Doug Edmond. For more, go to humanrightshub.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.